The crimson sands of Kethmar had drunk the blood of 1,000 civilizations, but none had prepared the galaxy for what emerged from the deepest caverns beneath the planet's surface. The creature that clawed its way into the dying light of the system's twin suns stood 12 feet tall at its shoulders, with obsidian scales that seemed to absorb light itself. Its 6 eyes burned like molten copper, and when it opened its maw, rows of crystalline teeth caught the last rays of sunset. The Galactic Council had a name for it within hours of the first sighting: Keth Gorath, the Warbeast. It was a name whispered in terror across 100 worlds as the creature began its rampage through the outer colonies. No weapon could pierce its hide, no army could stand against its fury, no species had ever seen anything like it. Captain Vexahai of the Centaurian Defense Force watched through his view screen as his flagship's plasma cannons discharged their full payload directly into the beast's chest. The creature didn't even flinch. Instead, it turned those burning eyes toward the ship hanging in orbit above the devastated colony of New Arcadia and let out a roar that somehow traveled through the vacuum of space to rattle the hull. "All stations, retreat to minimum safe distance," Vexahai ordered, his 4 arms working frantically across the control panels. Around him, his crew of various alien species worked in practiced harmony, but he could smell their fear in the recycled air. The Warbeast had already destroyed 3 battle cruisers and a space station. His ship would be next if they stayed, but as the vessel pulled back, the creature did something unexpected. It leaped. The laws of physics should have made it impossible. No creature that massive should have been able to generate enough force to break free of a planet's gravity well. Yet Keth Gorath soared through space like a living missile, its claws extended and mouth open in a silent scream of rage. Vexahai's ship barely escaped, jumping to hyperspace just as the creature's claws raked across their stern shields. As they fled, the captain's mind raced through possibilities. The beast wasn't just destroying randomly, it was hunting, learning, adapting. 3 systems away, the emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in the Great Crystal Dome of Nexus Prime. Representatives from 47 species filled the amphitheater, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of clicks, growls, telepathic whispers, and harmonic tones. At the center of it all, High Chancellor Morden's tentacles writhed with barely contained panic. "The reports are confirmed," she announced, her translation device converting her bioluminescent patterns into universal speech. "The entity designated Keth Gorath has now destroyed 17 colonies, 4 military installations, and 32 vessels of various classes. Conventional weapons are ineffective. Psionic attacks have no impact. Even our most advanced AI warforms have been torn apart like paper constructs." A reptilian delegate from the Saurian Empire hissed his displeasure. "What of the forbidden weapons? The reality shears? The quantum disruptors?" "Used and failed," came the reply from Admiral Core of the Machine Collective, his cybernetic voice flat and emotionless. "The beast's biology appears to exist partially outside normal space-time. It phases through our most destructive attacks while somehow maintaining physical cohesion to cause maximum damage." In the observation galleries high above the main floor, journalists and diplomats from across the galaxy watched the proceedings with growing dread. Among them sat Dr. Elena Vasquez, humanity's newest representative to the Council. She had arrived on Nexus Prime only 3 days ago with her 7-year-old daughter, Maria, expecting to begin routine diplomatic duties. Now she found herself witnessing what might be the galaxy's final desperate hour. Maria pressed her face against the transparent aluminum of the viewing panel, her dark eyes wide with curiosity rather than fear. At 7 years old, she didn't fully understand the gravity of the situation, but she could sense the adult's terror. "Mama, why is everyone so scared of the big animal?" she whispered in Spanish, tugging on Elena's sleeve. Elena knelt beside her daughter, struggling to find words that wouldn't terrify the child. It's hurt, Mija. And when animals are hurt and scared, they sometimes lash out. The grown-ups are trying to figure out how to help it. Down on the main floor, the debate continued with increasing desperation. The ethereal collective proposed attempting to communicate with the entity through quantum consciousness bridging. The hive minds suggested launching every available ship in a coordinated assault. The machine collective advocated for scorched earth tactics, destroying entire systems to contain the threat. But High Chancellor Mordunn's expression grew darker with each proposal. All of these strategies have been attempted by the civilizations that came before us. The Archaeological Division has completed their analysis of the ruins on Kethmar. This creature has awakened before. Every 10,000 years it emerges, and... She paused, her tentacles curling inward. The last civilization to face it simply vanished from the historical record. No ruins, no debris, no trace they ever existed. A cold silence fell over the assembly. In that silence, a new voice spoke up from the observation gallery. It was high and clear, cutting through the despair like a beam of sunlight. Maybe nobody tried asking it nicely. Every head, sensor array, and optical organ in the amphitheater turned toward the source of the voice. Little Maria Vasquez stood with her hands pressed against the viewing panel, looking down at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization with the innocent confidence that only a child could possess. Elena's face flushed with embarrassment as she tried to pull her daughter back to their seats. "Maria, we have to be quiet. This is very important." But Admiral Kor's mechanical head tilted with interest. The human child raises an intriguing point. In our analysis of the creature's behavior patterns, we have noted that it appears to respond with increased aggression when attacked, but shows different behaviors when ignored or approached non-threateningly. You're suggesting we send a diplomatic envoy to a creature that has killed millions? The Saurian delegate's tail lashed with indignation. "I'm suggesting," Kor replied with mechanical precision, "that our current strategies are mathematically certain to fail. Perhaps it is time to consider alternatives that do not rely solely on superior firepower." High Chancellor Mordunn's bioluminescent patterns shifted to deep contemplation. The Machine Collective's combat simulations show a 97.3% probability of total galactic extinction within 6 months if current patterns continue. Admiral, what do your projections show for non-aggressive contact scenarios? "Insufficient data for accurate modeling," Kor admitted. "However, the probability cannot be lower than our current trajectory toward complete annihilation." In the gallery, Dr. Vasquez held her daughter close as the debate raged below. She had come to the stars hoping to help forge a better relationship between humanity and the galactic community. She had never imagined that her 7-year-old daughter might hold the key to everyone's survival. The session continued for hours as species after species recounted their encounters with Keth Gorath. The pattern was always the same: approach with weapons ready, engage in combat, suffer catastrophic losses, retreat. No one had ever tried simply approaching the creature peacefully because no one believed it was possible. As the twin suns of Nexus Prime set beyond the Crystal Dome, Emergency Protocol 7 was activated. Every available ship in the galaxy would converge on the beast's last known location for a final, desperate assault. It would be the largest military force ever assembled in galactic history, and everyone knew it would probably be the last, but in the quiet moments between official announcements and strategic planning, a small voice continued to echo in many minds. Maybe nobody tried asking it nicely. The Warbeast, meanwhile, continued its rampage across the outer rim. It had just finished reducing the mining colony of Zarian 7 to rubble when it paused, its massive head turning toward the galactic core as if sensing something. For the first time since its awakening, Keth Gorath showed something other than rage. It showed curiosity. The creature's 6 eyes narrowed as it tasted the solar winds, processing information through senses that no other species in the galaxy possessed. Somewhere among the stars, something new had entered its awareness. Something small and bright and utterly fearless. For the first time in 10 millennia, the Warbeast felt something other than the burning fury that had driven it from world to world. It felt anticipation. Deep in the crystalline caves of Kethmar, where the creature had first awakened, ancient pictographs began to glow with soft light. The symbols told a story that no living archaeologist had been able to decipher, a story of guardians and tests, of waiting and watching for a sign that the galaxy might be ready for something greater than endless war. The light pulsed in rhythm with the Warbeast's massive heartbeat, growing brighter with each passing moment. Somewhere in the depths of space and time, an ancient protocol was activating, triggered by the words of a human child who believed that every creature, no matter how fearsome, might just need someone to ask nicely. The galaxy held its breath, unaware that its greatest test was only just beginning. The emergency fleet assembled in the neutral zone was a sight that would have been magnificent under any other circumstances. 732 vessels from 47 different species hung in formation around the massive command Dreadnought Unity's last hope. Sleek Centaurian destroyers flew alongside bulky Ursine battleships. Ethereal light frigates phased in and out of visible spectrum next to the geometric perfection of machine collective war cubes. Admiral Kor stood in the command center, his cybernetic mind processing data streams from every ship in the fleet. The creature had been tracked to the dead system of Omega-9, where it seemed to be waiting. That concerned him more than its previous rampage. All fleet commanders, report readiness status, he transmitted across all channels. One by one, the responses came back. Weapons charged, shields at maximum. Crews prepared for what everyone knew would likely be their final battle. The assembled fleet represented nearly 60% of the galaxy's total military capability. If they failed here, there would be nothing left to stop Keth Gorath from completing whatever agenda drove it. But Admiral Kor's attention was divided. In the observation deck of his flagship, Dr. Elena Vasquez and her daughter had been given guest quarters for their own protection. The human ambassador had insisted on coming, arguing that her diplomatic expertise might be needed. What she hadn't said, but what Kor's analytical mind had deduced, was that she couldn't bear to be separated from her child during what might be the galaxy's final hours. Maria Vasquez pressed her nose against the viewport. Watching the great ships drift past like mechanical whales, her mother sat beside her, trying to explain why they were here without terrifying her. "Remember what we talked about, Mija? About the herd animal?" Maria nodded solemnly. "The big one that's scared and angry." "That's right. Well, all these ships are here to try and help it." "With all those guns?" Maria's voice held the skeptical tone that only children could master when adults weren't making sense. Elena struggled for an answer. How could she explain galactic warfare to a 7-year-old? How could she admit that help and harm had become indistinguishable in their desperation? 3 decks below, Admiral Kor received the final strategic briefing from the Combined Tactical Committee. The plan was simple in its brutality. Surround the creature, bombard it with everything they had, and hope that concentrated firepower from an entire galactic fleet would succeed where individual engagements had failed. "Probability of success?" he asked his own tactical systems. 12.7%, came the mechanical reply. "Probability of total fleet destruction? 81.4%. Probability of creature containment, even if primary mission fails, 0.003%. The numbers confirmed what everyone already knew. They were sailing to their deaths on the slim hope that their sacrifice might buy the galaxy a few more months of existence. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Omega-9 system to find something that defied their expectations. The Warbeast wasn't rampaging. It wasn't destroying anything. It floated motionless in the void near the system's dead star, its massive form curled in what almost looked like a resting position. "Sensor analysis," Admiral Core requested. "The entity appears to be in a state of minimal activity. Energy emissions are at their lowest recorded levels. It's almost as if—" The sensor operator paused, rechecking his readings. "As if it's sleeping, sir." Through the fleet, a collective intake of breath occurred across 47 different respiratory systems. No one had ever seen the creature at rest. It had been a constant force of destruction since its awakening. "All ships, maintain maximum distance. Do not power weapons until ordered," Core commanded. His tactical mind raced through possibilities. An ambush? A new form of attack? Or something else entirely? The answer came from an unexpected source. Dr. Vasquez's voice crackled over the communication system as she contacted the bridge from her observation deck. "Admiral, you need to see this. Maria's been watching the creature, and she's noticed something the sensors might have missed." Core's optical sensors focused on the small human child who had somehow gained access to the bridge communication system. Maria's face appeared on the main screen, her dark eyes bright with excitement rather than fear. "Hi, Mr. Robot Admiral," she said with the casual friendliness of childhood. "The big space puppy isn't sleeping. It's waiting for something. See how its ears keep moving? And its eyes keep looking around? It knows we're here, but it's not mad about it." Around the bridge, alien officers exchanged glances. The child's observations were remarkably astute. The creature's sensory organs were indeed active, tracking the fleet's movements with what could only be described as interest rather than hostility. "Fascinating," Admiral Core transmitted privately to Dr. Vasquez. "Your offspring demonstrates remarkable observational capabilities. Has she had training in xenobiology?" Elena's laugh held a note of hysteria. "She's 7 years old, Admiral. She just likes animals." But Maria was still talking, her young voice carrying clearly across the command frequencies. "You know what I think? I think it's lonely. Big animals get lonely too. Maybe it just wants friends, but everyone keeps shooting at it so it gets scared and fights back." The simplicity of the child's logic cut through layers of military doctrine and strategic thinking like a laser through paper. In the silence that followed, Admiral Core ran rapid calculations. What if the creature's aggression was defensive rather than predatory? What if its rampage was a response to being repeatedly attacked? "Dr. Vasquez," he transmitted, "I'm going to make a request that violates every protocol in the Galactic Military Handbook. Would you and your daughter be willing to accompany me on a small shuttlecraft for a close approach to the entity?" The suggestion caused an uproar across the command channels. 47 fleet commanders began transmitting objections simultaneously, creating a babel of alien languages that threatened to overload the communication systems. But Elena Vasquez, diplomat and mother, understood the weight of the moment. "You're asking me to risk my daughter's life on the theory that this creature might be peaceful. I am asking you to help us test the one approach that hasn't been tried," Core replied with mechanical honesty. "The probability of success for our current mission is effectively 0. Your daughter's suggestion represents our only untested variable." Maria's face lit up with excitement. "Can we really go say hi to the space puppy? I promise I'll be good." Elena closed her eyes, weighing the impossible choice: risk her daughter's life on a desperate gamble, or watch helplessly as the galaxy burned around them. When she opened her eyes again, her voice was steady. "What kind of shuttle did you have in mind?" 20 minutes later, a small, unarmed diplomatic shuttle separated from Admiral Core's flagship. Its only occupants were a cybernetic admiral whose mechanical mind had calculated that conventional warfare was doomed to fail, a human diplomat who had made the hardest decision of her life, and a 7-year-old girl who thought they were going to make friends with a lonely space animal. As they approached Keth Gorath, the creature's massive head turned to track their movement, its 6 copper eyes fixed on the tiny shuttle with an intensity that made Elena's breath catch in her throat. At this range, they could see details that the fleet's sensors had missed. The intricate patterns in its obsidian scales, the way its crystalline teeth caught and refracted starlight, the almost hypnotic swirl of color in its burning eyes. "Mama, it's beautiful," Maria whispered, her face pressed against the viewport. Admiral Kor's sensors detected something remarkable. "The entity's energy signatures are shifting. Stress hormones are decreasing. Its posture is becoming less defensive." "Maybe it can tell we're not here to hurt it," Elena suggested, her diplomatic training finally finding solid ground in this impossible situation. The shuttle drifted closer, close enough to see the steady rise and fall of the creature's breathing, close enough to observe the complex play of emotions across features that seemed almost familiar despite their alien origin. And then Keth Gorath did something that no one in the galaxy had expected. It spoke. The voice that resonated through space was not the roar of rage they had heard before. It was deep and musical, carrying harmonics that spoke of vast intelligence and even deeper loneliness. The words came in no language that any galactic translator could recognize, but somehow their meaning was clear to everyone who heard them. "Who comes before the Guardian without weapons of war? Who approaches with offering of peace where others have brought only violence?" Admiral Kor's mechanical mind raced to process this development. The creature was not only intelligent but possessed of language, culture, and what appeared to be some form of moral code, but it was Maria who responded, her 7-year-old voice carrying clearly through the shuttle's external speakers. "Hi, I'm Maria, and this is my mama and Admiral Robot. We came to say hello because you looked lonely. Are you okay? Everyone's been really worried about you." The silence that followed seemed to stretch across the entire galaxy. On 700 ships, millions of beings held their breath as they waited to see how the most feared creature in known space would respond to the greeting of a human child. When Keth Gorath spoke again, its voice carried a note of wonder that transcended species barriers. "A youngling speaks truth where adults speak only fear. In 10,000 cycles, none have asked after my well-being. None have offered greeting instead of battle." The massive head tilted, studying the small shuttle with new interest. "You are not of the cycle species. What star children are you?" "We're humans," Maria replied, with the matter-of-fact simplicity of childhood. "We're new here. Mama's the ambassador, which means she helps people talk to each other instead of fighting. And I'm 7, and I like animals." Something that might have been laughter rumbled through the creature's massive form. "Animals, am I? Perhaps that is closer to truth than the Warbeast title given by those who fear what they do not understand." The communication channels across the fleet crackled with urgent transmissions as the implications of this exchange sank in. The creature wasn't just intelligent, it was disappointed. It had been waiting for something, testing the galaxy's civilizations and finding them all wanting. "What were you waiting for?" Admiral Kor asked, his mechanical voice carrying genuine curiosity. Keth Gorath's 6 eyes fixed on the Admiral with something like approval. "One who asks instead of assumes. A promising sign. I am guardian of the deep paths, keeper of the final gate. I wait for those ready to leave behind the ways of endless war and embrace something greater. And you test them by attacking?" Elena's diplomatic training struggled to find the logic. "I defend myself against those who attack first," the creature corrected with what might have been gentle reproach. "Every species that has awakened me has begun with weapons ready and violence in their hearts. I merely respond in kind, hoping that one will eventually choose a different path." The weight of revelation settled over the shuttle like a physical presence. Every attack, every battle, every death had been a test that the galaxy's civilizations had failed by shooting first and never asking questions. Maria's voice cut through the heavy silence. "So, you were just protecting yourself? Like when kids are mean to animals at the zoo and then wonder why the animals don't want to play?" "Your youngling speaks with wisdom beyond her years," Keth Gorath replied, and there was definite amusement in its tone now. "Yes, small human, very much like that." The creature's massive form began to shift, uncoiling from its resting position to float upright in the void. As it moved, its scales caught starlight and reflected it back in patterns that seemed almost like communication. The effect was mesmerizing, beautiful, and completely unlike the terrifying destroyer the galaxy had believed it to be. "The final gate awaits," Keth Gorath continued, its voice taking on a ceremonial tone. "Beyond it lies knowledge that your species are not yet ready to possess, weapons that could reshape reality itself, technologies that could elevate consciousness beyond physical limitations, secrets that could bring true peace to the galaxy, or destroy it utterly if misused. And you're the guardian," Elena realized. "You test each civilization to see if they're ready. I am, and in 10,000 years of testing, all have failed. All have chosen violence over communication, conquest over cooperation, fear over understanding." The creature's gaze fixed on Maria again. "Until now. Until a youngling spoke words no adult has ever offered. Concern for my well-being, friendship instead of hostility. Admiral Core's systems processed the implications at digital speed. You're saying that humanity has passed your test? One human has demonstrated the wisdom that an entire galaxy has lacked," Keth Gorath replied carefully. "But tests are not completed with single actions. They are proven through sustained choice. The question now is whether your species will choose the path of the Guardian or follow the familiar roads of war. In the observation decks of 700 ships, millions of beings watched as the fate of the galaxy hung on the words of a 7-year-old girl who had simply wanted to be kind to a lonely creature in the dark. The shuttle bay of Admiral Core's flagship had never hosted such an unusual gathering. Keth Gorath's massive form filled nearly half the space, its obsidian scales gleaming under the harsh utility lights. Around the perimeter, representatives from every major species in the galaxy stood in careful formation, their various forms of armor and environmental suits creating a rainbow of technological adaptation. Maria Vasquez sat cross-legged on the deck plates directly in front of the creature, apparently unimpressed by the fact that she was the first being in galactic history to share breathing space with the legendary Warbeast. She had her favorite stuffed animal, a small purple elephant named Senior Trunk, clutched in her arms as she chattered away at Keth Gorath with the unconscious ease of childhood. "And then the mean kids at my old school said that aliens probably don't exist, but I told them they were wrong because the universe is really, really big, and it would be lonely if we were the only ones here. Mama says the universe likes to surprise us." Elena stood nearby, her diplomat's training warring with her mother's instincts as she watched her daughter treat the galaxy's most feared creature like a favorite uncle. Admiral Core's optical sensors tracked every micro-expression on both faces, searching for signs of deception or danger. But there was only wonder and something that could only be described as delight in Keth Gorath's copper eyes as it listened to Maria's endless stream of observations about everything from her pet goldfish to her grandmother's tamales. "Your youngling possesses remarkable wisdom," the creature rumbled, its voice now modulated to a gentle whisper that wouldn't damage human hearing. "She sees connection, where others see only difference. Unity, where others see only division." High Chancellor Morden's tentacles writhed nervously as she approached the group. The emergency council session had been relocated to the shuttle bay when it became clear that Keth Gorath would not fit in any normal conference room. "Guardian," she began, using the title that seemed to please the creature more than Warbeast, "we must discuss the practical implications of your test. The galactic economy has been severely disrupted. Millions have died. How do we explain to our populations that this was all a trial they failed to pass?" Keth Gorath's massive head turned to study the Chancellor, and for a moment the temperature in the bay seemed to drop several degrees. "You speak of implications and explanations as if they matter more than the truth you have learned. Your civilizations have been tested and found lacking in the most fundamental quality necessary for advancement: the ability to choose peace over violence when faced with the unknown. But we're choosing it now," Maria piped up, apparently oblivious to the tension in the room. "Everyone stopped shooting when I asked them to say hi instead. That means we can learn, right?" The creature's expression softened again as it regarded the child. "You speak truth, small one. Learning is possible, though it requires fundamental change. Your species must prove that this moment of wisdom is not an anomaly, but the beginning of genuine transformation." Admiral Kor stepped forward, his mechanical mind already calculating possibilities. "What form would this proof take? What must we do to pass your test completely?" "The final gate leads to knowledge that could remake your galaxy," Keth Gorath replied solemnly. "But such power in the hands of those who default to violence would mean universal destruction. You must demonstrate that your civilizations can exist without the constant threat of war. That you can solve conflicts through cooperation rather than conquest." A Saurian representative hissed his frustration. "You ask us to abandon millions of years of evolutionary development. Competition and conflict drive progress. Without them, civilizations stagnate." "Do they?" Maria asked, looking up at the lizard-like alien with innocent curiosity. "I learned more cool stuff this week just by asking questions and making friends than I ever did from fighting with Tommy Peterson at my old school. Fighting just made everyone sad." The simplicity of her logic created another of those profound silences that seemed to follow the child wherever she went. Around the bay, representatives from species that had been locked in territorial disputes for centuries began to shift uncomfortably as they considered her words. Dr. Threnai of the Ethereal Collective floated closer, her translucent form shimmering with patterns of deep thought. "The human child raises a valid point. Our greatest scientific advances have come from collaborative efforts, not military conflicts. Perhaps competition need not require destruction." "Easy words," growled Commander Urgtoth of the Ursine clans. "But territory and resources are still limited. What happens when two species need the same worlds? When population pressures drive expansion? Do we just ask nicely and hope for the best?" It was Elena who answered, her diplomatic training finally finding its footing in this impossible situation. "We learn to share. We find new solutions. We expand our definition of what's possible instead of fighting over what's limited." She gestured toward the massive creature that dominated the shuttle bay. "How many resources have we wasted on weapons designed to kill each other? How many brilliant minds have been focused on destruction instead of creation? What could we accomplish if we redirected all that energy toward cooperation?" Keth Gorath's head bobbed in what might have been approval. The mother speaks wisdom that echoes her youngling's innocence. This is the lesson that has eluded 47 species across 10 millennia of testing. "So what's beyond the gate?" asked Captain Vexhigh, his 4 arms crossed over his chest. "What knowledge is so dangerous that you've guarded it for 10,000 years?" The Guardian's 6 eyes seemed to look beyond the shuttle bay, beyond the ships hanging in space around them, to something that existed in dimensions the others couldn't perceive. Technologies that make faster-than-light travel seem primitive. Methods for transforming consciousness itself, allowing beings to exist as pure thought. weapons that could crack the foundations of reality and reshape the universe according to will. Knowledge of other dimensions where different laws of physics apply. The power to create or destroy entire galaxies with a focused intention. The silence that followed was absolute. Even Maria stopped chattering as the weight of the revelation settled over the assembly. Admiral Kor was the first to speak, his mechanical voice carrying uncharacteristic uncertainty. Such power, who could be trusted with it? That is precisely why the test exists, Keth Gorath replied. Power without wisdom leads to universal catastrophe. Your species must prove they possess the emotional and spiritual maturity to handle such capabilities responsibly. And how long do we have to prove ourselves? Elena asked, already dreading the answer. The testing period has already begun, the creature replied. From this moment forward, I will observe how your civilizations interact with each other and with the knowledge that the gate exists. Do you descend into competition over who will gain access first? Do you attempt to manipulate or coerce each other? Do you return to the familiar patterns of conflict and conquest? Maria tugged on the creature's massive claw to get its attention. What if some people are good and some people are not so good? Do the good people get to open the door anyway? The question struck at the heart of the dilemma, and Keth Gorath considered it carefully before responding. Wisdom from the youngest among you, as has become the pattern. Yes, small human. Individual virtue matters, but the test is ultimately collective. Your species must demonstrate that they can govern themselves without destroying each other. That means the good among you must find ways to guide the not-so-good toward better choices. Like being a good example? Maria asked brightly. Exactly like being a good example. High Chancellor Mordun's tentacles had gradually stopped writhing as she processed the implications. This changes everything. Every diplomatic relationship, every trade agreement, every territorial dispute. We're no longer just governing for ourselves. We're proving our worthiness to an intelligence that could grant us godlike power. Or deny it forever, Admiral Kor added with mechanical precision. Guardian, what happens if we fail this extended test? Do you simply leave and take the knowledge with you? Keth Gorath's expression grew somber. If your species prove themselves incapable of growth, the final gate will be sealed permanently. The knowledge beyond it will remain locked away until this galaxy dies and new civilizations rise to face the same test. I will return to my deep sleep, waiting for the next cycle to begin. And if we succeed? Elena asked. Then the galaxy takes its next evolutionary step. The barriers between species become meaningless as consciousness itself expands beyond physical limitations. Suffering becomes optional. Death becomes a choice rather than an inevitability. The universe opens its deepest secrets to those wise enough to use them well. The magnitude of what hung in the balance left even the most eloquent diplomats speechless. But Maria, with a child's ability to cut through complexity to the essential truth, asked the only question that really mattered. How long do we have to show you we can be good? There is no time limit, youngling. The test ends when your civilizations either transcend their warlike nature or prove themselves incapable of such growth. It could be decades, centuries, or millennia. Maria nodded seriously, then brightened with sudden inspiration. Oh, I know what we need! She jumped up and ran to her mother, whispering urgently in Elena's ear. Elena's eyes widened. Maria! I don't think... Please, Mama. It's important. After a moment of internal struggle, Elena nodded and spoke to Admiral Kor. My daughter has a request. She'd like to establish what she calls a friendship protocol between all the species in the galaxy, official policies that prioritize cooperation and communication over conflict. Elaborate, Admiral Kor requested, his sensors focusing on the small human with new intensity. Maria stepped forward, clutching Senor Trunk tightly. Well, when kids have fights at school, the teacher makes them talk about their feelings and find ways to solve problems without being mean to each other. What if all the grown-ups in space had the same rules? Like, before anyone can start a war, they have to try talking first. And if that doesn't work, they have to ask other people to help them figure it out. And if someone is being really mean, everyone else works together to help them learn to be nice instead of just fighting them back. The proposal was so simple, so obviously logical, that it took several minutes for the assembled representatives to process why no one had ever implemented such a system before. It was Dr. Threnai who finally spoke, her ethereal voice carrying notes of wonder. A galactic mediation system. Mandatory diplomatic intervention before military action. Collective responsibility for guiding aggressive species toward peaceful resolution. It could work, Admiral Core concluded after running rapid simulations. The mathematical models suggest significant reduction in large-scale conflicts. Resource allocation efficiency would increase by 47% if military expenditures were redirected toward diplomatic and social programs. Commander Urgtoth's growl had shifted from hostility to thoughtful consideration. The Ursine clans have always respected strength. But perhaps there is strength in choosing peace when violence would be easier. One by one, around the shuttle bay, representatives from 47 different species began to nod their agreement. The child's simple proposal had given them a framework for something they had never imagined possible. A galaxy where cooperation was the default response to conflict. Keth Gorath watched the process with growing amazement. In 10,000 years of testing, no civilization had ever spontaneously developed a collective commitment to peace in response to his challenge. They had always fragmented into competing factions, each trying to gain individual advantage, but these species were doing something unprecedented. They were choosing to succeed together rather than fail separately. "Your youngling continues to astonish," the Guardian rumbled, its voice carrying overtones of deep respect. "She has proposed the very foundation upon which galactic civilization must be rebuilt if you are to pass the test." Maria beamed at the praise, then walked up to the massive creature and placed her small hand on one of its claws. "Will you help us learn to be better? You've been around for a really long time, so you probably know lots of good ways to solve problems." For the first time in 10 millennia, Keth Gorath felt something that had been absent from its existence for so long, it had forgotten the sensation: hope. The creature that had terrorized the galaxy for weeks, slowly, carefully, lowered its massive head until it was level with the 7-year-old human who had changed everything with a simple act of kindness. "Yes, small guardian of friendship," it said softly. "I will help you learn. And perhaps, in teaching you, I too will remember what it feels like to hope for something better than endless cycles of testing and failure." As the creature that had bowed to none gently nuzzled the child who had spoken a single word of welcome, the representatives of 47 species began the work of rebuilding galactic civilization on a foundation of cooperation rather than conquest. The final gate remained sealed, but for the first time in 10,000 years, there was reason to believe it might one day open not to destroy the galaxy, but to transform it into something wonderful beyond imagination. And in the shuttle bay of a flagship that had come prepared for war, a little girl named Maria taught the universe's most ancient guardian that sometimes the most powerful word in any language is simply hello. The test had begun in earnest, but for the first time in galactic history, there was genuine reason to believe it could be passed.